Hello and welcome to Hare and the Hawthorn. My name's Kate Ray. I'm your host, and we have two things back on this episode. We have the ears. People seem to like them. I like them. Neil still doesn't. I've not convinced him to buy a pair yet. And as you can see, Neil's back from the Caribbean. He didn't get sucked into the Bermuda Triangle, which is nice, and he's back with us. We have got more spooky Hare and the Hawthorn shows to come. We've got one coming up Friday the 13th, and it's very, very apt for the guest that's coming on Friday the 13th. So there will be times when Neil will be in the cupboard clutching onto his teddy bear for fear of being attacked by the darker side of things, or as he likes to say, on his yacht out to sea. So I'm going to welcome. I'm going to welcome Neil in at that point.
Yeah, a euphemism that is, out on my yacht. It's
I don't want to know what euphemism that's for.
Well, people can leave comments if they so wish. But yeah, nice to be back, and yeah, cheers.
Oh, and the goblet's back. The proper
goblet's
goblet.
back, of course.
Excellent. That's full of, now we know, cider. So if anybody missed that episode, we had revealed what was in said Hare and the Hawthorn goblet. So you may have noticed that not only has Neil got his goggles on, I've got my goggles on, which means one thing, that we'll be doing a fairy census review. Neil, can you just explain to viewers who might not know what the fairy census is? What is the fairy census?
Yeah, well, this is from the Fairy Investigation Society, organised by Dr. Simon Young, our good friend on Hare and the Hawthorn. And he has now put together two censuses, both with about 500 reports of fairy type entity encounters. First one came out in 2017, and the second one came out last year. And both of them, as I say, have 500 reports, and they are a mine of information for research into modern fairy sightings. Some of them, especially in the first one, actually go back to the 1960s or 70s, with people remembering their experience. But the majority of them are from this century, and certainly in the second volume, many of them are from within the last decade, or very recent encounters. So they're a mine of information. Please do go. You can buy them online in hardback, not hardback, paperback versions, but hard copies. But you can also go on to the Fairy Investigation Society, where you can download a free PDF of both volumes, which is absolutely fantastic. Brilliant research tool.
It is, and it's great reading. So even if you don't want to use it as a research tool, just going through it's absolutely fascinating to delve into the world of what people have been experiencing. And one of the things that both Neil and I have spoke about before when we've talked about the censuses, there are things in there that you would go, 10, 15 years ago, people would not have attributed this kind of anomalous phenomena as fairy. They would have put it down to ghosts, demons, apparitions, just a whole plethora. I can't even talk tonight. Plethora of things, and people are now delving a bit deeper into the meaning of these encounters and interactions, and we've both found them really fascinating. And for me, it's those that are sort of just tittering on that WTF kind of line, that sort of really prick my ears, get me watching, get me listening. It's gonna be one of those cheesy nights, isn't it? Cheesy nights. So what we're going to do is we've chosen two each, and we don't know what each other's chosen, so it's all exciting to us. And we're going to read them out and unbox them from our perspective, chat about the motifs in them, how it's come about, and sort of a wider psychology, and just look at them as a mini case, and we'll take it from there. So Neil, if you wouldn't mind starting us off, because you chose quite a biggie for your first one, didn't you?
Yeah, sorry, this is a little bit of a long one, which is unusual because it's from the first volume. The ones in the second volume tend to be longer than the ones in the first volume, but this kind of bucks that trend, and and it is a little bit long, but bear with me because it's so interesting. I tried to sort of edit out some of it, but you lose the ambience of it if you try to do that. So this is the full report, and my second one, which I'll do later, is a shorter one. So let's call this up so that I can read you through this. So just concentrate on the experience. So this is volume 1, number 337 from New York State in the States. And it's from a male. It's in the 1990s when he was in his 40s. It's in woodland, in open lands, on a country road. He was on his own, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., 1 to 2 minutes. This is the sort of prologue that all of the reports have. He was glad to be out of New York City and in a contemplative and reflective state of mind. That's important. A sense that the experience was a display put on especially for him, and unusually vivid memories of experience, and a sense that the experience marked a turning point in his life, which is a very common motif. So this is the report. I live in New York City, but in October 1996, was visiting my mother, an extended family who lived in upstate New York. It was the middle of October, and my mother and my aunt had taken a drive out into the country to see the foliage. It was a very beautiful, cool, clear autumn day. Towards late afternoon, we stopped in a small town to have dinner. My mother and aunt walked to shop afterwards, and I wanted to take a walk in the countryside, which surrounds the town. I walked to the edge of the town and then into the rolling land around it, open fields in the centre with woods on either side. I was in a relaxed, happy, and contemplative mood. I'd been walking about 10 minutes when suddenly I heard a kind of sing-song chanting in my mind, which sounded like a multitude of very, very sweet, pleasing voices that were all speaking the same words almost simultaneously in a kind of cascading oral waterfall effect. I'd never experienced anything like this before at any time, and the words were, "Don't you see us? We're all around you. We're all around you. Don't you see us? Look, don't you see us?" Stunned, I stopped walking and took in the experience. There was a smallish tree near me, but otherwise I saw only open fields, woods at a distance to my right, and a two-lane road beyond on either side. I did look around me, certainly not expecting to see anything unusual, and saw nothing except the autumnal landscape. I heard the voices for about 90 seconds, and then they stopped. I walked on for another 20 minutes and then returned to the town where I met my family. I said nothing to them about my experience and reflected upon it on the long drive back to where I trained back to New York City, and having packed, went for a walk on a familiar wooded path behind my mother's housing development, a path which ran adjacent to a residential street of traditional old American homes. I'd been walking for about 10 minutes when suddenly I heard the voices again in exactly the same manner I'd heard them the day before. The voices said, "We're here, come this way, walk this way, we're here." And I looked to my left and saw another path through the woods that led to a place where I could plainly see at the end of it. I turned left and walked down the path, still hearing the voices. But as I approached where I thought I was hearing the voices, they came to a stop. It's a fairly quiet street, but does get some car traffic, and somewhat stunned and dazed by this new experience, which seemed to validate my experience of the day before, I walked north past the homes using the lip of the road as there were no sidewalks. The road curved slightly at various points, and rounding one of these curves, my eye fell upon a grouping of 4 garden gnome statues on the front lawn of one of the homes. The statues were traditionally sculpted and done in what I would call a tasteful and realistic manner. They weren't the kind of mass-produced cartoonish garden gnomes that are so prevalent today. The 4 gnomes were sitting in positions arranged so that they were facing one another. When I saw them, it was like receiving a blow to the chest, though I realized instantaneously that they were statues. But seeing them at that moment seemed to identify the sources of the voices to me in a manner which I can only call profound, as if the statues were what I was meant to see when I turned off the initial path and walked towards them. Several hours later on the Amtrak train, just as dusk was falling and the last of the day's light was disappearing from the surrounding farmland, I turned to look behind me in the setting sun, and just as I did so, I heard the voices again in the same manner I had before, and again the voices were sing-songy, but less so than on the previous occasions. The voices, which I have to paraphrase in this case, said, "You are leaving us now, and the autumn door is closing. You will forget about us for a long, long time, but we have a date with you in the distant future. You will meet us again then." And at that moment, the sun disappeared behind the horizon. I found this third experience exhilarating and emotionally powerful. So I never saw anything visually other than the gnome statues, but I have for some years now come to tentative conclusion that the voices were fairy voices. What struck me most, and still strikes me now, is that they thought I would forget them and the experience, which I certainly never have, nor have I ever come to think of it as unimportant. I want to state that before the three experiences, which all took place within just over a 24-hour period, I did not believe in fairies or elves by any mean. I had never had any experience of hearing voices mentally, nor have I since. The experience did profoundly change the way I think about reality and my own life. Due to the nature of these experiences, they're difficult to put accurately into words as I've experienced them. And then he just finishes off by saying, reiterating about the voices were pleasant, sing-songy, were cascading, overlapping, just to sort of repeating what he's told us in that experience report. What do you think of that one?
Okay, so I'm going to work backwards on this. So how you read the last part where they said, you're going now, you'll forget us, autumn's coming to an end, kind of thing. Obviously paraphrasing that, but the way you read it, I was like, are these mafioso type fairies? You are going now, winter's coming. You will forget us. Um,
I,
um,
I, so, I probably didn't convey this, but it's more when he's talking about their voices. I'm thinking that they're talking a little bit like this.
yeah. I think one of the and going backwards with it, if he's been drawn specifically to these statues and these statues aren't the norm of mass produced, is it an idea? We know that there are cultures such as China and Japan that have spirit houses in their garden to invite ancestors and sort of elemental beings into the garden. Could it be that gnomes become attached to their likeness in the way that the spirits of the dead then become attracted to things like dolls? So we get a lot of haunted dolls. They look like human beings. So as a spirit, it's easy to recognize a doll as a human. And dolls and puppets were used to encase human spirits historically. Could it be that the gnome statues are possessed?
Possessed, yeah, that's that word has a sort of too much of a resonance for what you're talking about, like spirit
Yeah.
possession. This is perhaps not the right word, but I know exactly what you're saying. I think that, well, there's lots there's lots going on in this. I
Yeah.
love this report. When I first read this, I thought that's brilliant. I just love that. I've never heard anything quite like that either. And I was, first the the guy, he's come from, he lives in New York, stressful life by the sound of it, and suddenly he's in upstate New York
Mhm.
in peaceful environment. That does things to you. It does
Yeah.
anything, and it's potentially opening your mind to things that otherwise wouldn't come in. That in your everyday life, you filter it out, and then suddenly you're in a beautiful environment, and everything's more peaceful than it usually is, and your transceiver opens up a little bit, and so that is, his transceiver has opened up, and what's coming in for some reason um, are, well, supernatural voices,
Mhm.
and they're coming from outside his usual take on the electromagnetic spectrum.
Mhm.
Now there could be many reasons for that, but I think a lot of it is to do with his psychological condition at that time. Now, now that can happen to anyone, sure, but the amazing thing is that he got directed to in some way these garden gnomes.
Mm-hmm.
And I I think that sounds like a message. It sounds like something, as well as the words they were saying, we're here, we're everywhere. Can you see us?
Mm.
Playfully, so it's sort of playful, we're here all the time. It's them saying we are part of a bigger consciousness.
Mm.
And that bigger consciousness is everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to filter it through your brain. And usually you filter it out
Mm-hmm.
because it's too much to take in. But on this occasion, it's for whatever reason, it's coming in to his mind, the bigger consciousness of which they are a part, whatever they are coming into his consciousness. And they're tricksters,
Yeah.
or they're often tricksters. And this sounds like a little trick. It sounds like a little bit of a game.
Mm-hmm.
They've led him up this path around this road that he doesn't usually go along. And hey, presto, there you go. There's a representation of what we might be. In this
Yeah.
case, gnomes, much as in the same way as pareidolia in trees, for instance. You suddenly feel the need to look at the tree,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a face there.
Mm-hmm.
And the materialist reductionist will say, you're just making it up because you see human faces, and that's pareidolia.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily. There's something fairy, nature, spirit, whatever you want to call it. There's something that's part of that tree that is making some kind of communication with you, sort of
Mm-hmm.
threshold communication. Not coming, it's not full blown experience, but it's nearly there, and perhaps just to make you think a little bit more about it. And I think that's the case with when he's come upon these garden gnomes.
I'm going to throw in a curveball, and I'm going to be, and this is not like me at all, but I'm going to go super, super skeptical on this, super skeptical. So from a skeptical point of view, and I'm just trying to see it from a point of view of somebody who would like to debunk this. So could it be that this guy is, stressed out from city life? It's an overload of the senses in the city. They've slowed down into a natural environment. They're taking an exhale. Those kind of circumstances we know psychologically do very odd things, and audio hallucinations aren't a particular rarity. They do occur. And if he is having some kind of audio hallucination, and he's in a natural environment, that would kind of go hand in hand with, say, that kind of commentary, and that it was just a complete fluke that he took that path and came across those names.
Now you're starting to sound like a coincidence theorist. No, no. Well, it's anything is possible. One thing we should say about these reports, it's you can interpret them, any of them, in many ways,
Yeah.
and you might always come down on no, that's nonsense. That's I take a reductionist view of it, or the person is just making it up.
Mm-hmm.
The language in this one does not sound as though it's someone just making it up for a laugh. It sounds as though he's had this experience.
But I mean,
Uh,
audio hallucinations as well as visual hallucinations can be hugely profound without it being attached to anything spiritual. They can have a massive, profound effect, and people can get these without any other inkling of anything like this happening again or before in their life. It's not.
but yeah, possibly, but even the word hallucination is, I don't like that word because it's whatever it is definitely embedded within your consciousness,
Yeah.
and therefore it's real
Yeah.
at some level.
Yeah.
Whereas when people say hallucination, what they mean is it's not real and you've misinterpreted it.
Yeah.
That's just happened. So that word, hallucination, no, what's happening is it's definitely real. Whether it's just a kind of tweaking of consciousness that's done that,
Mm-hmm.
um, or whether there is something external making it happen, well, it's impossible to know. especially in a case like this when there's no visuals and
Yeah,
it's all sound.
I think which either side you go on, I think with these cases, whether it's something that's not so much a supernatural phenomena, but it's a human phenomena, or whether it is a supernatural phenomena, both are equally as interesting, because what would trigger that particular kind of language, that particular, he's had the experience of these voices that if you're going to experience voices, why particularly that association that he's had, saying that it's a sing-songy type voice, it's one that you'd expect from the Fey realm. It's just fascinating whether you're going to be skeptical or not about it. I think it's yeah,
Yeah,
it's a good one.
and having, because of my Charles Bonnet syndrome and the little fellas who turn up for me, and there's usually an audio with it. And I would never think of that as an audio hallucination. I'm not
Mm-mm,
hallucinating that. It's there.
mm-mm.
It's in my mind. Not that they ever say anything profound, but but probably not as profound as this particular report. But yeah, no, it's a good one.
It
And
is.
for our American viewers, there's something from America just to prove that the fairies are there as well as
Oh,
in
there's
Britain and
rafts of them.
Ireland.
There's
Yeah,
rafts of them in that second one, which is nice. It's nice to see a lot more coming out of America, because it's got such
yeah,
a rich melting pot of cultures within America that um,
yep.
it's kind of, you never know what's going to come out. Following on, segueing nicely, just to nick your word. See what I did then?
Segue away.
I'm segueing. I'm segueing into something that kind of in the same realm, but I want to talk about this particular one slightly differently. So this one is from the Fairy Census number 1, and it happened in England, in Dorset. Dorset. I can't say Dorset without going Dorset. It's a female. It's 2010-ish. She's between 41 and 50. She experiences it in the garden. She's on her own. It's between 9 p.m. and 12 a.m. It happens for 1 or 2 minutes. It's mischievous, joyful. She's had occasional supernatural experiences, like you've just woken up or you're just about to go to sleep, loss of sense of time, a sense of that the experience was a display put on for her, um, unusually vivid memories of the experience, which is, it happens a lot within the census, doesn't it? That people say it,
Hmm.
it stayed with them for a very long time. It was very impactful. So she said, and bearing in mind that these are actually written verbatim, they're not edited, so these are literally as they're very, very rarely tweaked, but this is written verbatim. 2 of my children were camping at the bottom of the garden. At roughly midnight, I went out to check they were okay before I went to bed. As I approached the tent, I could hear whispering in the garden and giggling. I heard a voice whisper, "It's Mum," from one side of a tree, then giggling and whispering from another area. I thought my kids were up and messing about in the garden, so I hissed back at them that I was angry with them for being up. I then unzipped the tent, and they were both fast asleep in their sleeping bags. I checked all around the garden, but there was no one there. We do not have neighbours with children. We have a very rural. We are very rural, and the garden backs onto water meadows. The voices sounded very childlike and mischievous. Childlike hissy voice, like whispering and suppressed giggling. It seemed like these were a number of voices. I didn't feel scared or threatened of the voices, and they knew me as Mum rather than my name, like they had previously heard my children using that. So that's my first one. What do you think?
Um, well, I don't want to turn into Mr. Skeptic, but how
Do
does she
it.
know how does she know the kids weren't talking in their sleep?
That's a good one. That is a good one.
I mean, that's a possibility, especially as they're calling mom.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my first that would be my first thought. And you'd have to talk to the person more to flesh out
Mm-hmm.
why she might think that was not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Have they ever talked in their sleep before? And even if they hadn't, camping outside might change the way you act, even when you're sleeping a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's a possibility. Sorry to me, I don't usually come in with, Mr.
I know.
Skeptic like that. But uh, but hmm, I mean, again, we've done two audios, haven't we? And um, I
I
don't know. I don't know why have you chosen this one? Why you seem to
so
uh, have a
I
glint in your eye about it?
I chose this one. So the ones that other than the next one that I'm going to read out, when I'm doing this, I usually choose the ones that I've set aside for paranormal workshops on the fairies. So I look at them and say, how would I approach this as a ghost hunter? If somebody came to me with this evidence and didn't use the word fairy, how would I approach this as a ghost hunter? Now, she said that the voices seem to have come from two separate places in the garden, one behind a tree, one further away. And there was giggling. And I'm like the first question that you'd ask could it be possible that that audio, if the kids had been awake and they'd said it's mum really quiet and then giggled, whether that audio could have been dispersed in a funny manner within that open environment? That's the first thing. I think the thing that fascinates me about this, and it fascinates me about many of them that you can read in the census, where it is audio, this is actual direct voice phenomena that she experiences. So with the last one that we looked at, it was sort of an internal sound that he experienced, like an audio hallucination. So direct voice phenomena without an actual figure or being detected, whether being seen or heard sort of walking around, that is very much in the realm of ghost hunting, um, working with spirit and the paranormal on that side of things. Why then? This was my question. Why then did she assume that it was fairy and not go down the line of child ghosts?
Well, this is the thing. I'm not casting aspersions on the way Simon's collected this data, but there is a kind of inherent issue with the census, is that there's a kind of cut-off for the information we have about the people who are giving the reports.
It would be
Uh,
massive if he did everything. It would just be too
well,
big.
it would be massive, and of course, one of the big things about the census, both of them, is that everyone is anonymous.
Yeah.
So, and that's quite important part element of the census. And if you start getting a load of life details about people, that they might feel as though, oh well, someone's going to recognize me and
Yeah, yeah.
someone will obviously know who I am. So in this particular experience, I would want to know whether this woman was had any previous interest in the fairies, and therefore she might be predisposed
Mm,
to think about this experience as a fairy, as fairy. Whereas we've talked about this so many times. Whereas if she'd been into ghosts, if she'd been
mm.
reading books about ghosts for the last 10 years, she might have been predisposed to think to interpret it as a ghost. So there's that. That would be my answer to your question. She's probably imbibed some fairy traditions and folklore,
Mm-hmm.
but of course we don't know that. That's
No,
pure guess,
no.
because that's all we've got from the report. So there's that.
Yeah, I mean, it does. This one particularly fascinates me because of that, because it is what is the element that tipped her over into thinking this was fairy. I think it might have been because she said that she wasn't afraid, and even when people experience, spirits of children who have passed over, there is still a chilly element to it. They do affect the atmosphere very, very differently. The spirits of the dead. It's temperature and the static and the electromagnetics. People talk about moving through sort of a field of static or through cobwebs in those situations. There is something in you that says, you know, beware, be on your guard. And she says in this instance that she's not afraid.
Mm.
There's nothing scary about it. So I wonder whether it was that element of it or whether it was a tonality that these were giving off, whether it just sounded non-human. But yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's where that kind of world collides for me. But I genuinely love reading this kind of thing in the census because it's people going, there is more to this world than just ghosts, aliens, and demons. There
Yeah.
are other planes of existence. There are other dimensions that are equally as fascinating. So yeah, that's the win
Yeah,
for me.
and that's one of the great that's the great thing about the census, both of them, is that it's um made much more acceptable over what was the first one, 2017. Since 2017, it's made the phenomenon that we talk about all the time broader
Yes.
and more acceptable to be able to talk about um fairy type entities.
Mhm.
And the census, both of them have had a big role to play in that. Not, there are other things that other people are doing. Well, both you and I, for instance, and lots of other people at the moment are sort of talking about fairies where maybe 10 years ago that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that is interesting. And the other thing about that particular report, lives in a rural area in Dorset with backing onto water meadows.
The
Oh,
bastard.
so some people get all the luck, don't they? Oh God,
Mhm.
looking out at my terrace neighbours. Oh well. Anyway, that's another story. Yeah, no, good one. Right, should we go on to my second one?
Crack on.
Crack on. Now, this is a bit of a scary one. This is, and it's from the second census, and it's actually the first one in the second census, number 501. And get ready for a little bit of purple prose from the person who's writing it, which made me smile. But it's a very interesting and shows the darker side
Good.
of fairy. So this is England in an unknown, we don't know where, but it's in England. It's a male. He's in his late teens, and it's in the 2010s. He's in woodland with another person who did not share the experience. 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. 1 to 2 minutes, threatening. Occasional supernatural experiences he's had. And he was very sad. A sense that the experience was a display put on specifically for him, yeah, and a sense that the experience marked a turning point in his life. Again, there was a sudden chill before the experience. So this one's quite short, but listen up, as it's a good one. I was walking through the I was walking through the woods at dusk with my father when I heard a sort of crunching, static sound, like a more aggressive, corrupted form of the fairy bells of old, and a sound that I had heard many times in the last few years, often paired with some sort of fairy attributed experience. We were walking onto a track through the forest when we turned right towards a heathland. I heard the sound and I turned around to see a dim lamp post throwing a jaundiced light over a strange, blurry, disfigured, thin, tall thing, something like out of a horror movie. It just stood there in the centre of the road and watched me. Turning back ahead, I swiftly left the forest and got back to our car to speed home. It was tall, dark, thin, featureless. It was like the music of my nightmares, distorted and spine-chilling and full of anger and despair. Why do I think there's fairies? Because I've had other connected experiences and others that are more distinctly fairy related. And these are all connected clearly. It feels like these otherworldly in-between creatures are trying to tell me something. What are fairies? Fairies are spirits of the wild, of nature, of history, and inhabit the in-between spaces. They are essential to our existence. So he's had the thesaurus out there, hasn't he, to
I
write
quite
it,
like that one. Yeah,
write it that one,
yeah, I like that one. I do like that one.
throwing a jaundiced light upon it.
You're
But
just
it's
jealous because somebody's come up with that absolute pearl of a line.
oh, that's going in the next novel. That one I've already written that down. It's yeah. So it's quite short. It's not much to it, actually. He saw this horrible figure, felt a not particularly nice feeling, a slightly sinister feeling, maybe,
Hmm.
and then sort of dashed it, but back to the car. But again, we're hearing, there's the audio quality to this, but this time you've got the visual
Yeah.
quality, and he's obviously just scared of it. Now, you could sorry, the first thing is he's obviously had other fairy experiences, which is a little bit frustrating. You're wanting him to sort of flesh that out and say, oh, well, 3 years ago I had this experience and this experience, and this is how it's related to that. But he
Hmm.
doesn't. He just says fairy experiences, which again, that's just the way it is with some of these reports.
Hmm.
And um, and but otherwise, it's a strange figure in the woods at dusk, and interesting. And what is most interesting is that he's obviously scared by it.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, the first thing that I can personally resonate with, I have had twice now, been in woods and had that ominous sound and feeling behind me. One, the last one was a few years ago. Stood looking up at the moon. It was full moon. Stood looking up in the middle of the woods, and I didn't know whether a deer was going to run into the back of me. Something came up with a great force behind me, but it came with that wave of static. And I braced for thinking something was going to sort of smack into the back of me. And I think I actually yelled out loud as it was coming up. So I can definitely relate to that. That for me, and I think he alludes to it a little bit, that to me felt very ancient, very, very ancient.
Mm.
That's the only way I can describe it. I couldn't tell you why it felt like it was ancient. The second thing about that report is I just had a thing then of is Slenderman
Yeah.
is is Slenderman fairy? You know,
Well,
I,
in some respects, of course it is, but
yeah,
it's yeah, that's that's the other thing I was going to say. If anyone doesn't know Slenderman, go just search for
Google
it, and
it.
you'll find all of the reports about something called the Slender Man, which
Don't
sounds
do it.
exactly.
Yeah, but don't do this before you go to bed, else you won't sleep. So I do
Yeah,
it in the day and then watch something nice after.
yeah, yeah. And Slender Man is usually described as featureless, dark, tall, slender, skinny, obviously, um, and usually, not always, but usually with quite a sinister feeling surrounding him,
There's a watching aspect, isn't it?
that people have reported,
They Slenderman is often reported just watching, just observing, in a
which is
sinister
what
way.
as in this report,
Yeah, yeah.
as in this report, yeah.
I mean, in a recent podcast, somebody else's podcast that was on, I think I pissed off a load of cryptozoologists by saying that, there are theories about Bigfoot being a fairy. And I think we're delving into that now, aren't we? Where we're kind of delving into the dark side of the paranormal and going, is Slenderman a fairy?
Well, we've had this discussion many times, haven't we, about, where is this phenomenon coming from? And are all of these types of paranormal, supernatural phenomena, are they all from the same place?
Yes.
They're all coming from the same place, and it's just our individual consciousnesses, not just individual, but actually social conscious as well. So someone in a certain part of America might be more inclined to see a Bigfoot, whereas if you're in Dorset, you'll hear fairies, etc., etc. We've talked about this loads of times, and have been coming to that conclusion for a long
Yeah.
while, that there is a source, a greater consciousness that is feeding into individual minds and consciousnesses, and the result can be multifarious,
Yes.
but uh,
Multifarious.
many of them can
Did you realize what you
multifarious.
did you
Didn't
realize what you
didn't
said
even
then?
mean to say that.
That sounds
Right,
brilliant.
I think we better get. I think we better go on to the fourth one. Go on.
Before we get into the fourth one, I just want to sort of round up what you were just saying there, because we off air we'd had a conversation not long ago, didn't we, about you know, we both seem to be coming to that same conclusion, don't we? That that we are the anomaly, that the kind of the thick resonance of human beings in this material plane is the anomaly, and that the etherical astral planes, or whatever you want to call them, the vibrational plateaus of other beings are the norm, and they are here. This is their realm.
Yes, our material universe, the entire material universe, is just a tiny piece of the greater consciousness. So our entire universe, the material part of it, is small,
Yes.
and all of these kind of phenomenon are part of the greater consciousness, which is non-material. But for whatever reason, at whatever time, there's an interaction, there's an interface that can happen where they can turn up into the material realm, or sometimes, such as with a DMT experience, we can go into their realm for a while, or even the abduction phenomenon that might come into that as well. That's really a big subject for another time, another day. Yeah, we'll be here all night on that one. What's your second experience report?
So my final one this time, if I can find it, and I hope you don't mind, but after I read it out, I want to tell you why it's significant. And it'd be nice to have your point of view to see what you think of it and what you think of why I resonate with it. So this is Ireland, and it's a male. It's the 1990s. He's between 21 and 30. He's in an open field and has one other person who shares the experience with him. It's between 9 p.m. and 12 a.m., 1 to 2 minutes, mischievous, angry, aloof, never or almost has supernatural experiences, no special state reported, hair prickling or tingling before or after or during the experience, a sense that the experience was displayed, put on specially for you. Everybody feels that, don't they? Like it's just for them. It's a little act just for them.
Very common.
Very common.
Yeah.
Okay. While traveling at night on a road that ran up some mountains, we saw a shapeless white form that appeared to be a white shopping bag blowing around in the wind, moving quickly up the mountainside. It was moving against the wind, however, uphill. We had to pull off the road at a lay-by to look at the views of the city lights down below when we noticed the shape jumping from tree to tree towards us. It was about 2 or 3 square feet in area and had a matte bluish white colour, like a large pillowcase or, like I said earlier, a shopping bag. No markings or features, not shiny at all, looked like a strange cloth, more a strange cloth than plastic. Both myself, an American, and my fiance, who is Irish, had a feeling that whatever it was, its intentions weren't good. We had a general sense that something was unpleasant was about to happen, and if it caught up to us, so we jumped back in the car and hightailed it out of there, like an amorphous shape, vaguely rectangular, size changed through the experience. Right, I chose this one, and I'll tell you off the bat why I chose this one. I had just finished, myself and a colleague, good friend and a colleague, had just finished a guest spot at a paranormal event at Woodchester Mansion in, I think it's Gloucestershire. I'm sorry, Woody.
It is, yeah, it is.
If I get it wrong.
It's Gloucestershire.
Okay. Yeah. Fantastic place just to even go and visit anyway. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And it's fascinating as well because there's burial, and that could be quite significant. There's are they Neolithic burial? On it's literally just up the path from Woodchester Mansion. There's 2.
What do they look like? What a roundabout?
I think there's one no, I think the long barrows. I think
that's Neolithic. Yeah.
Yes. So there's long barrows on the top of the ridge, which is literally just over the road from the end of the drive at Woodchester Mansion, which may have some significance. And so it was probably about 3 o'clock in the morning when we left Woodchester Mansion, and there's probably about 3/4 of a mile drive up the drive, or it feels like that because you're going very, very slow. So it's a really long drive from the actual house. And we were just chatting about the night, weren't going fast at all, probably under 10 miles an hour because it's a rickety track. And we both spotted, and it was almost illuminating. It was pitch black. It was almost illuminated. What looked like, as was described in there, a large carrier bag, or like a 30-litre bin liner or something like that, in the trees, and it swooped down like you would imagine some kind of bird to swoop down, and then kind of curled itself. And we were expecting it to hit in front of us, not far from the car, probably a car's length away on the road, to be able to go, wow, that was a weird experience. It's a carrier bag. And it disappeared.
Hmm.
It never hit the ground. It just went. And we were like, we've spent
Did you?
all night looking for ghosts
and,
and seen none.
yeah.
And then we come out and it was the strangest
Did you?
experience.
Did you see it disappear, or did you just lose sight of it?
It disappeared. No, we saw it disappear. We both tracked it, and then it went, because we both said they were expecting to see a large carrier bag that had just sort of, but it had a sentience to it. It felt
Yeah.
like it had jumped in the tree and then swooped down, and it kind of curled, and went to hit the floor. There was nothing there. And as we were driving, there was nowhere. It was banked up either side. There was nowhere that it could have gone to disappear. It didn't just float away. It wasn't windy. It wasn't. It was a very still night, so it couldn't have just. It was crazy. I didn't think of that as a fairy experience. I thought of that as a WTF experience. Like, what category do you put that in? It didn't feel ghostly. It didn't feel, but it felt very otherworldly. But at the time, and even now, I would say I'm not quite sure whether that's fairy.
Sometimes those type of slightly amorphous experiences like that, where you're thinking, I can't quite place that. Even sometimes, if you just see a weird moving light in the sky, is that a UFO? Is that something else? It's almost as though the experience hasn't quite come to fruition.
Yeah.
So in another instance, you might be seeing that white, whatever it was, and the next it would be a being.
Yeah.
It would be a fairy, an alien, or whatever you're predisposed to see. But it's an experience that hasn't quite manifested. That what we were just talking about a moment ago, that interface between the bigger consciousness, non-materiality, and our material world. Sometimes they touch and then go.
Mm.
Whereas in full-blown experiences, they mesh for a while and you have a full-blown experience. So that's one possibility, both in your own case and this report, is that they're seeing something that didn't quite come to fruition. That's one thing. The I'm being a real scully today.
Do it.
Can't believe it. It could have been, because that anyone with a skeptical mindset will say, well, you thought you saw it disappear, but it just went behind a tree and you didn't quite notice, and it was just the wind blowing about a bag in a slightly weird way, and you don't need to worry about it. Look away now and move on. That's that's what would be said, isn't it? Whereas from what you are talking about, and in the report, there's the feeling that comes with it. There's a feeling that something is present that is not usually present, and you don't get that from a carrier bag.
No. And this felt solid. If I'd have been driving on my own, it'd have been that time in the morning. I'd been, putting in a 7-8 hour shift doing some ghost hunting. I was driving back. You're in that kind of hypervigil mindset anyway because of the environment that you've been in. If I'd have been driving on my own, I'd have been like, I'm never telling anybody about that because I'm seriously losing the plot that I think a carrier bag's some kind of entity. I
Yeah.
was with another person who's an investigator who's very grounded. He's very grounded, and he's not at all woo woo. In fact, he's critical all the way until the point of he can't explain it, if you like. And we were both
Yeah.
like, what was that? The other thing that you were saying about not quite manifesting. That's right. Oh, getting into that time of the evening. Is Are these things a energetic plasma that if the conditions were better, that would have been more recognizable as an interaction, or is it that it's been disguised as something, so you are not revealed the truth of it at that particular time because you wouldn't be able to interpret it in a certain way? Do you understand?
Yeah, I think the latter is more feasible, to be honest. It's I think that's very realistic. You know, that whatever is operating in this bigger level of consciousness is almost certainly more intelligent than we are in some ways, and may probably realize that no, you can't have a full blown experience, but we're
It's
just
like
going to
this.
give you a little
I'm in the
taste of it.
trees and I'm swooping about and there's human beings. And it's like, whoops, whoops. I better
Yeah.
not show myself to him. I'm going to come. I'll carry a bag, carry a bag. I'm panicking. What should I show myself as?
Well, it's yeah, more or less. It's the other very important aspect, both to your own experience and the census experience, is that it's a multiple person
Yeah.
experience. This is always very, very important in any kind of paranormal or supernatural experience.
Mm,
If two or more people experience the same thing, you can pretty definitely rule out something wrong with the mind or
mm,
psychology of a single person.
yeah.
And so I'm always on the, I've written a couple of articles on that because I think it's a very important point in any of these kind of experiences. If you've got multiple witnesses, it's like, right, you've got to take this a little bit more seriously,
Yeah.
because you can't just say, oh, you just you'd been smoking too much, whatever, or
Dare you?
so that's a very important point from both those experiences.
I think what just from my experience, and the last thing I'll sort of include in this was at that time we were doing a lot of car share. So there was a lot of us who were driving to and from different locations in twos, just because of the aspect of safety of driving after being in that situation, because your brain does start doing some very weird
Yeah,
things.
that, yeah,
You not only you're in that kind of hypnagogic state from 3 o'clock in the morning when your cortisol's doing all kinds of funny things, but um, it can come across some very strange experiences. But we used to have a game that we played, and it was one of those things to try and keep us awake and alert. One of the games, and one of the games was, what's the weirdest thing that you could see on the side of the road? And it was things like a pixie riding a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and you'd have to think of the next weirdest thing. And I don't know, is that something that we manifested into the world? What's the weirdest thing you can see? A sentient carrier bag, you know?
yeah, that would be up there. It's
Yeah.
I would say it's yeah, yeah. Is it manifesting, or is it just well, yeah, I guess it is manifestation. If you're talking about this and you allow in something beyond your normal everyday
Mm,
reality, something from another reality that you are imagining, I think it's more imagination than
mm,
manifestation. But that imagination can allow, coming back again, allow that interface, because whatever is in that greater consciousness is probably fully aware of what's going on in this material reality.
mm.
And for whatever reason, if someone takes a great interest in that, and oh well, can we see a pixie now? Can we see a gnome? They like the guy in the first story. that's exactly it, isn't it?
Mm.
Did he manifest those garden gnomes that suddenly, linked in with what he was hearing? I don't know. It's a very interesting point.
It is. I was just really glad that I found that in the fairy census because I was like, I couldn't have believed in a million years that I would ever find anybody who had had that almost exact experience that we had. It was like one of those, wow.
We can call it the supernatural carrier bag experience.
Yeah, that's not got a great ring to it, has it?
I thought it was great.
I like all right then, let's go for supernatural sentient supermarket bag. It could be the triple S experience.
Yeah, that's good.
Right, well, I think that's us done, isn't it? For the
That's
fairy
it.
fence.
That's fantastic. It's we we'll probably do some more of these,
I love doing them.
because there are for a start, there are so many of them. There's over 1,000, and you can you could some of them are not great. They're very short, and it's just not worth doing it. But some of them, I'd say most of them, you could read it out and interpret it in many ways.
Mm.
And you could just, maybe we should just devote all of the rest of the podcast just to read.
Well,
No,
we
we won't do.
could, we
Well, wait,
could, but we have exciting projects coming up, don't we? So one of the projects that we've got coming up in the future that you've got to keep an eye out for because I'm so excited about this is we have good friend of the show, Paul Goddard, who, if you've seen him before on this show, he is a qualified hypnotherapist who does past life regressions and regressions within this life. And one of the things that we're going to be doing in up and coming videos is looking at people's fairy experiences under regression. So Neil's going to be our first guinea pig. I'm hoping you're okay with me announcing this, Neil.
what?
he, he
Well, it's
did,
not going to be the first one. Well, we'll have
yeah,
to
yeah,
negotiate
yeah,
this,
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah.
Well, Neil will definitely be in there. We are looking for other fairy experiencers. However, it has to be. We don't want anybody sort of rocking up and saying yes, I've had a fairy experience, and then just playing about with us. So we want genuine people for this because we are very grateful that Paul is giving over his time to this. He's excited about the project, and we're very grateful that he's given over his time and his expertise for this. So, if maybe you've had a fairy experience, but that and want to be regressed to that point again to experience it a second time, and maybe look at it from an observational viewpoint, we'd love to hear from you. We would love to hear from you. Drop a comment, find us on social media. Talking of social media, you're getting very dark over there. It's like, are you still there,
I know.
Neil?
I know. I'm sorry. I forgot to put the light on, and as the evening falls, I turn into darkness. Sorry, I can't
Okay,
reach the light. You just
I'll keep this brief then before you go into a complete gloom. So Neil and I were speaking before we came on air about uh, creating a Facebook page that is a Hair in the Hawthorn YouTube channel, Facebook page for you as a community to come along to and talk about your experiences, what you think of the show. If you want a calendar in the new year of different photographs of Neil, you can put your suggestions on there. We did get that suggested, didn't we? Do you remember? The first year you were on, people were saying that there was a couple of people saying that they wanted
yeah,
a
yeah,
calendar of
yeah.
you. Yeah, that's funny. Anyway,
Okay, okay, get on with it. Go
yeah,
on.
I'm going to stop embarrassing him. Else he's gonna quit. He'll end up quitting on me, and it'll just be me in my ears. So if that's something that you think you'd like, I'm going to give it a go. So I'll get it. Not the calendar, Neil, but if the Facebook page is if the Facebook page is something that you think is a good idea, then I'll try and get it set up with. I'll aim for sort of mid to the end of September to get that set up, so we can all chat. It will be moderated by us, so yeah. you'll have to be careful what you're
Yeah,
saying on there.
I think that's a good idea. I'm sure people will, yeah, people will appreciate it, I think. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, it'd be nice. It'd be nice to actually speak to people directly as well. So, yeah, if you want to get in contact with us over social media, Neil's got a really good blog site, Dead Book Dreaming. Is your contact stuff's on there as well, isn't it, Neil?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So go over and find Dead Book Dreaming. It's an absolute resource. So if you're if you're sick to death of listening to our Dorset tones, you can go and read. And now you know Neil's voice, you can read it in his voice, which is great. Anyway, I'm waffling and it's getting to that
yeah.
time. So thank you very much, Neil, before you go into the void.
Well, yeah, you can hardly you, you can hardly see me.
I know, it's like a mime artist. All right, on that note, it's getting silly now. Okay, watch out for the next podcast coming out, which is Friday the 13th, which is with Dr. Kate Sherrill, which is very interesting. It's gothicy and spooky, and it's great for Friday the 13th watch. So, and other than that, we'll see you very soon.